My parents banned from the family cruise. Mom texted, "We're just taking your sister's family this year, keeping it classy." I stared at the message for 3 seconds, then smiled. They had no idea I owned a ship twice the size. Sup, Reddit? Not sure where to even start with this one. But let's just say growing up, I was never the favorite kid. My parents made that pretty clear. I learned early on that if you're not perfect on paper, you don't exist. But life has a funny way of flipping the script when you least expect it. So yeah, here's how I went from being the family embarrassment to the guy they pretend they always believed in. If you ever want to know what it feels like to be invisible while standing in plain sight, try growing up in a family like mine. My parents were the kind of middle class people who thought status meant everything: what car you drove, what school you went to, what your job title sounded like. They could be dead broke and still talk like they owned the country club. Then there was my sister, Diane, the family trophy, straight A student, student council president, cheer captain, and apparently the second coming of Einstein mixed with Martha Stewart. If there was an award within a 10-mile radius, she had her name on it. My parents practically built a shrine to her in the living room. Her trophies lined up like a museum exhibit. And then there was me, Evan, the other one. I wasn't bad at school. I just didn't care about memorizing useless junk I could look up later. History dates? Who cares? Math formulas? I could fix a generator, but apparently that didn't count. Every report card came with a lecture, and every lecture came with a reminder that Diane never had these problems. Dinner time was my favorite show, The Roast of Evan. Mom would slide a plate across the table and go, "Maybe he's like this because I dropped him on his head once as a baby." Everyone laughed, even Dad. I laughed too, because what else was I supposed to do? Dad was worse. He loved calling me the family embarrassment. He'd say it like it was a joke, but you could tell he meant it. If I brought home a C, he'd shake his head and mutter, "You'll never make it in life if you keep acting like a screw-up." Funny thing is, I wasn't a screw-up. I just had a different kind of brain. While Diane was studying for her AP exams, I was in the garage building things from scratch, fixing lawnmowers, wiring old radios, taking apart engines just to see how they worked. Neighbors started dropping by, asking if I could help with their machines or fences. I liked that. Real work. Stuff that made sense. One time, I rebuilt an old dirt bike from parts I found at a junkyard. It took me 2 weeks, and it ran smoother than Dad's new sedan. I rolled it into the driveway, proud as hell, and revved it up. The sound was perfect. Mom peeked out the window, wrinkled her nose, and said, "That's nice, dear. But you should be studying instead of wasting time on toys." "Toys," I repeated, staring at the machine I built with my own hands. Right. Next week, Diane brought home a certificate for outstanding leadership from her school. They threw her a party. Balloons, cake, family photos. My dirt bike got parked behind the trash bins so it wouldn't mess up the view. That was the pattern. I'd fix something or build something, and they'd nod for half a second before bringing up Diane's next big achievement. I once repaired our entire air conditioning unit for free, saving them a $600 service call. Dad's response? "You should have spent that time studying algebra instead." I started doing stuff for other people instead. Mrs. Taylor down the street paid me $50 to fix her fence. Mr. Reynolds asked me to help rewire his garage. I liked seeing how surprised people got when I actually solved their problems. They said thank you. They smiled. It was weird getting more appreciation from neighbors than my own parents. At school, teachers pegged me as the hands-on kid. I took every shop class available: woodwork, auto, electrical, and aced them without even trying. I could build a coffee table faster than most kids could spell geometry, but none of that mattered at home. "Nice, Evan," Mom would say. "But what are you going to do with that? You can't live off fixing tables." "I could probably sell them," I'd answer. Dad snorted. "Yeah, right. You think you'll get far with that? You need a degree. Look at your sister. She's going places." Sure, Diane was going places. Mostly to the mall with Dad's credit card. But hey, who's counting? I remember one night when it clicked for me. Diane got accepted to some fancy university. They celebrated like she'd won the Nobel Prize. Mom hugged her crying. Dad gave this emotional speech about raising excellence. Then Dad turned to me, clapped my shoulder, and said, "Maybe one day you'll figure it out too, son." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Maybe I already did." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm done trying to impress people who'll never notice." He didn't like that answer, but I did. For once, I felt in control. That night, I filled out my trade school application. Construction and electrical program. 2 years, no nonsense, real work. No pretending to care about essays I'd forget tomorrow. I didn't tell them. I just mailed it out. When the acceptance letter came, I didn't get a hug or even a congrats. Mom just said, "So you're going to be, what, a handyman?" I smiled. "Nah, I'm going to build things you can't even imagine." They laughed, of course, but that's okay. Let them laugh. I already knew I was building something they'd never understand, starting with my future. Trade school wasn't glamorous, but it made sense to me. While my old classmates were pretending to care about college lectures, I was wiring circuits and framing walls with people who actually worked for a living. I took every shift I could: construction sites, warehouse gigs, fixing whatever needed fixing. The days were long, my hands were always cut up, but at least I could see progress. You can't fake a house standing. That's where I met Miley. She worked mornings at a nearby farm and evenings at the diner next to my part-time site. First time I saw her, she was hauling crates of vegetables off a pickup like it was nothing. Everyone else was complaining about heat, and she was out there smiling. When she noticed me watching, she yelled, "Don't just stand there, future handyman. Grab a box." I did. She laughed, called me slow, and that was it. We started talking during lunch breaks. Miley was down to earth. No makeup, no filters, just real. She'd ask about my projects, and she actually listened. No one ever did that before. When I told her I was studying construction, she said, "That's smart. You build stuff people actually need. Not everyone has to wear a suit to matter." I think that was the first time I believed that sentence. We started dating after a few weeks. She'd bring homemade sandwiches to my work site, and I'd fix broken equipment on her farm. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. She'd talk about maybe starting her own produce business someday, and I'd joke that I'd build her the best farm stand in Florida. By my second year in trade school, we were serious. I had my certificates in electrical and framing, was working full-time on weekends, and saving up for my own tools. Miley kept pushing me to start a small shop when I graduated. "You'll kill it," she'd say. "You actually care about what you do." I guess that's why I agreed when Miley said she wanted to meet my parents. We'd been together 2 years, and she thought it was time. She was nervous but excited about it. Went out and bought a new dress just for the dinner. Big mistake. The second we walked through the door, Mom gave her that fake polite smile, half sweet, half insult. "Oh, so you're the farm girl Evan told us about?" Miley smiled. "Yes, ma'am. I work over at Greenleaf Farm. We raise vegetables and—" Mom cut her off. "Farm work. That must be exhausting." She said exhausting the way people say disease. Dad joined in, leaning back in his chair. "So, Evan, this the plan. You and the farmer girl? What happened to finding someone from our level?" "Our level?" I asked. He nodded toward Diane's wedding photo on the wall. "Your sister married a financial analyst. You bring home kale." I leaned back and smirked. "Yeah? And that financial analyst still owes you money from the last great investment, remember? Miley actually earns what she makes. Can't say the same for your golden boy-in-law." He didn't like that. Dinner got worse from there. Every time Miley tried to talk, they twisted her words. When she mentioned waking up at 5 a.m. for farm chores, Mom said, "See, Evan, maybe she can teach you work ethic." And then they laughed, like that was comedy gold. When Miley complimented the house, Dad smirked. "You know, we've worked hard for this." Not everyone can handle success. Some people are allergic to it. He looked right at me when he said it. I grabbed her hand to leave, but she squeezed mine first, trying to keep things civil. After dinner, she thanked them for having her. Mom gave a smile so tight it could have cracked glass. On the drive home, Miley was silent. I tried joking about it, saying, "Well, at least nobody threw food." She didn't laugh. We parked outside her farmhouse. She sat there staring out the window. Finally, she said, "I don't think I can do this, Evan." "Do what?" "Be hated for being with you. I love you, but your parents will always see me as less. I can handle hard work. I can't handle being mocked every time we walk into a room." I told her we could move, start fresh somewhere else, but she shook her head. "They'll still be your family." "That won't change." And I didn't argue. I could see she'd already made up her mind. She kissed my cheek, said, "You deserve better than them, but I can't be the one fighting them forever." Then she walked inside. I just sat in the truck for a long time, staring at the dashboard. The same hands that built engines and fences couldn't fix this. My parents had managed to ruin the one thing in my life that actually felt right, and they'd do it again without even blinking. I drove home slow that night. The streetlights blurred together, and all I could think about was how every time I tried to build something good, they found a way to tear it down. When I got back, Mom was waiting in the living room with that smug look. "She seemed nice," she said, sipping tea. "But you should really aim higher, Evan. Someone with ambition." I smiled. "Yeah, I will." She nodded, completely missing the sarcasm. I went to my room, packed away a photo of Miley and me at the fair, and tossed it in the drawer. Then I opened my laptop and started looking at tool suppliers and business permits. If they wanted to see ambition, I'd show them, just not the kind they could brag about. That night, I decided I wasn't just going to build houses, I was going to build something so big they'd have to choke on their words. And this time, I wouldn't ask anyone's permission. After finishing trade school, I threw everything I had into starting Harrison Builds. It wasn't much, just me, a beat-up secondhand drill set, and a logo I printed on sticker paper. I rented a small storage unit for tools and used my garage as an office. If I'm being honest, it was more folding chair than office, but hey, it worked. The first few months were chaos. Jobs kept falling through, suppliers delayed materials, and everyone wanted me to work for exposure like I was a local charity. I took anything I could get, deck repairs, drywall, cheap renovations, just to keep the lights on. There was this one guy who hired me to remodel his kitchen, promised half up front, half on completion. Since the job was too big to handle alone, I brought on two guys a buddy referred, solid workers who trusted I'd pay them once the client did. He smiled, shook my hand, said, "You can trust me." That line should have been the first red flag. 2 weeks later, he disappeared, and I was left staring at unfinished cabinets and a pile of bills. I ended up selling my truck just to pay my workers. That was the first real hit, the kind that makes you sit in the dark, wondering if you've completely lost your mind. For a while, I lived on instant noodles and coffee so cheap it could have doubled as paint thinner. My bed was a half-deflated air mattress in the corner of the office. I used a power drill as a paperweight and a cardboard box as a nightstand. Every night, I'd stare at the ceiling, trying to figure out what part of the plan I'd messed up. But quitting wasn't an option. Every failure just made me meaner in a good way. One morning, after another client ghosted me, I called my dad. Stupid move, I know. But I needed to hear something. Anything. Maybe I hoped he'd finally act like a father. "Hey, Dad," I said. "Rough month. I'm trying to keep the business alive." He sighed like I'd interrupted his golf swing. "I told you, business isn't for guys like you. You should have stuck to working for someone who knows what they're doing. Maybe call your brother-in-law for a job vacancy." I didn't even respond. Just hung up, sat there for a minute, and muttered, "Guess that's settled then." That phone call flipped a switch. I stopped thinking about proving anything to them. I started building for me. From then on, I ran Harrison Builds like a war zone. Every dollar had a purpose. I took smaller jobs but did them perfectly. Clean lines, no shortcuts, no nonsense. If I said Tuesday, it was done Monday night. Word got around fast. There was this old couple, the Harpers, who needed their back porch rebuilt after a storm. Everyone else quoted them crazy prices. I did it for fair money. On time, no excuses. They told 3 of their friends. Then, those friends told more people. Before I knew it, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Still, it wasn't smooth. I once spent 3 nights fixing a plumbing disaster in an old motel because the owner refused to pay for proper materials. The pipes burst the next day, flooded the place, and somehow it was my fault. I got stiffed again, but I learned. Get everything in writing. Another time, my buddy Luke and I were framing a roof in the middle of July. It was 102 degrees, and the nails were so hot they burned through gloves. I looked over at him and said, "You think Diane's husband ever sweated this hard for a paycheck?" He laughed, wiped his face, and said, "Yeah, but he probably got a bonus for sitting in AC." It was rough, but those moments kept me going. By the end of that year, I had calluses thicker than leather and a reputation starting to build. Small, but solid. People liked that I actually showed up when I said I would. Apparently, that's a rare talent in construction. One morning, while I was patching a fence for a local shop owner, he mentioned he had a friend looking for someone reliable to build a vacation cabin by the lake. "He's had 3 contractors bail," he said. "You finish what you start, right?" "Always," I said. That one job changed everything. The cabin was small but fancy. Custom woodwork, stone fireplace, skylights. I poured every ounce of effort into it. Worked 14-hour days, no complaints. When it was done, the client looked around, nodded once, and said, "You did good work. You're hired again." He referred 2 more people. Then those people referred more. By spring, I had contracts lined up for months. I remember sitting in that same folding chair in my garage office, looking at my first profit sheet, real money this time, and thinking, I didn't just survive, I built something. No investors, no fancy degree, no handouts. Just sweat, skill, and a stubborn refusal to stay down. That night, I bought myself a truck. Not flashy, but mine. I drove around the neighborhood with the windows down, just enjoying the sound of an engine that didn't rattle. For once, it didn't feel like I was chasing something. It felt like I was catching up. I didn't call my parents to tell them. They'd just ruin it with sarcasm anyway. Instead, I parked the truck outside the job site, looked up at the stars, and thought, this is just the start. I wasn't there yet, but for the first time in my life, I could see the road. And that road? It wasn't paved with luck. It was built with early mornings, burnt coffee, and busted knuckles. Over the next 5 years, Harrison Builds turned into something real. The kind of real people notice but don't understand. I went from patching fences and cabins to renovating luxury homes, then to building custom villas along the Florida coast. It didn't happen overnight. I earned every inch of it. I'd wake up before sunrise, load my truck with supplies, and work until the last bit of daylight disappeared. My crew was small but solid. Guys who didn't need motivation posters, just fair pay and lunch breaks that didn't suck. By year 3, the name Harrison Builds started floating around high-end neighborhoods. I remember the first time a wealthy client handed me a blueprint for a coastal mansion and said, I want this, but better. I smiled and told him, then you came to the right guy. We finished that mansion ahead of schedule, and the client's neighbor hired me the next month. That's when I realized reputation was worth more than any ad. Funny part? While my company was booming, my personal life looked exactly the same. Same pickup truck. Same boots. I didn't want to give my parents or anyone else a reason to think I was suddenly trying to prove something. They still believed I was doing odd jobs. A mom once called to ask if I ever considered going back to school because construction must be slowing down. I just said, yeah, something like that, and let her believe whatever made her sleep better. Meanwhile, Diane's picture-perfect life was falling apart in slow motion. Her husband, the financial genius, had a knack for spending money he didn't have. They upgraded cars every year, threw parties like they were royalty, and financed it all on loans. Every family gathering, Dad would brag about Diane's success, even as she whispered about late payments and shrinking savings. I stayed out of it, let them live their fantasy. I had work to do. Then came the deal that changed everything. A big developer out of Miami was scouting contractors for a coastal resort, a luxury project worth $180 million. The kind of deal that could turn a company from local to national overnight. I almost didn't apply. It was too big, too corporate. But something in me said, you've been building for this moment since you were fixing fences for $50. So I pulled 3 all-nighters drafting a proposal. Clean design, efficient build plan, cost-effective but premium finish. They called me in for a meeting. The boardroom smelled like ego and overpriced cologne. One of the execs glanced at me and said, "You're Harrison?" "Last time I checked," I said. They laughed, but not kindly. I didn't care. I started my presentation, walking them through every inch of the plan. Materials, timelines, labor logistics, storm resistance, everything. When one of them tried to interrupt, I said, "You can stop me if I mess up the math, but I've been building longer than most of you have been reading contracts." Silence. Then nods. Then questions. Good ones. 2 weeks later, I got the call. Harrison Builds won the contract. I didn't even celebrate. Just sat there staring at the email for a few minutes, then whispered, "All right, let's get to work." That resort nearly broke me, but in a good way. 18-hour days, dozens of crews, permits, delays, storms, and about 47 moments I thought I was going to lose my mind. But when it was done, when the first sunset hit those glass balconies and the lights reflected off the ocean, it was perfect. The client called it a masterpiece. The press called it a modern engineering marvel. I called it Tuesday. That's when Harrison Developments was born. I upgraded the name, expanded operations, hired full-time architects, designers, and contractors. We became the company people called when they wanted something impossible built right the first time. I still didn't tell my parents. When Mom called to check in, she asked if I was still doing handyman work. I said, yeah, a few small projects. She sighed and said, at least Diane's family's doing well. You'll figure it out eventually. Right. Diane's family was doing well. Her husband had just defaulted on a business loan and was secretly borrowing from Dad. But in their world, appearance mattered more than reality. My mom didn't even see my success. She was too busy helping Diane pick out furniture she couldn't afford. I didn't mind. I wasn't working for recognition anymore. I'd built something solid, something mine. But a part of me couldn't help it. I started keeping track of every time they looked down on me, every comment, every jab. Not out of bitterness, but because I knew one day I'd get to flip the script. And when that day came, I wouldn't need to raise my voice or explain myself. I'd just let the results speak. So I kept my head down, built more, earned more, and said nothing. Sometimes silence is the loudest revenge there is. Business was running smooth, my company was booked months out, and life was quiet, the way I liked it. Then one spring morning, I got a text from my mom that could have been a comedy sketch if it wasn't so predictable. Hey, we're doing a family cruise this summer. Just Diane and her family, keeping it classy. That was it. No invite. No, we'd love to have you. Just a polite brush off with a sprinkle of snobbery. I stared at the message for a second, then laughed out loud. Keeping it classy, huh? Translation: don't show up and ruin our fake image with your toolbox hands. I didn't even respond. Just locked my phone and went back to reviewing blueprints. But later that week, I ran into my Uncle Rob at a supply yard. He gave me that awkward look people give before dropping bad news. Hey, did your mom tell you about the cruise? He asked. Yeah, I said. Apparently, my invite got lost in the mail. He sighed. They only invited relatives with office jobs this time. Said they wanted to make it more elegant. Anyone who works blue collar got left out. Your cousin Nate wasn't invited either. He's a mechanic, you know. I leaned against my truck and smirked. So the new rule is, if you use your hands, you're not family? Rob chuckled but looked embarrassed. You know how your parents are. They think image is everything. Yeah, I knew exactly how they were. They could be sitting in a pile of unpaid bills, but as long as Diane's husband wore a tie, they'd act like royalty. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I started calling around. Cousins, aunts, even a few old family friends. Same story, every time. Mom and Dad told them they were keeping the trip exclusive. Exclusive meaning anyone who actually worked for a living wasn't good enough to stand next to Diane's crew. It was funny in a pathetic kind of way. Half the people they cut out were the ones who'd help them fix their house, mow their lawn, or lend them money when Diane's husband's ventures tanked. I sat at my desk, scrolling through the cruise details they bragged about online. A mid-tier, no-name line that cost less than one of my custom kitchen installs. Nothing fancy, but they were acting like it was the Titanic's second coming. That's when the idea hit me. Not out of revenge, at least not entirely. More like poetic justice. If they wanted to exclude everyone who wasn't classy, I'd throw the classiest trip possible. Just not for them. By the next morning, I was on the phone with a luxury charter company. I didn't need an ocean liner, just a small private luxury ship. Enough cabins for a few hundred people. I told them I wanted top-tier everything. Suites, entertainment, spa, the whole deal. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly called everyone my parents had left out. Plumbers, electricians, mechanics, farmers, people who actually did things. Every call ended the same way. Disbelief, then excitement. Wait, you're serious? My cousin Nate asked. You're paying for the trip? Yep. Flights, transport, cabins, food, everything. Just bring your family and sunscreen. Man, your parents are gonna lose it. Yeah, I said. I'm counting on it. We set a custom Caribbean route. White sand beaches, 5-star dining, live shows, marble bathrooms, the works. The chef was Michelin rated. The spa came with private suites, and there were custom menus for kids, vegetarians, and diabetics. I even added daily excursions, snorkeling, jet skiing, hiking, the works. Meanwhile, Mom's little classy cruise had people crammed into windowless rooms, buffet food that looked like it survived a nuclear blast, and plumbing problems that had passengers posting horror stories online. Every time I checked the reviews of their cruise line, I laughed harder. Great service if you enjoy cold showers and mystery meat. 5 out of 10 stars. Perfect. Mine? I paid for premium everything, down to embroidered towels. I told the crew to treat every guest like royalty. Not the fake kind like my parents. Real respect. The best part was watching the responses from the people I invited. Everyone was genuinely touched. Some hadn't had a vacation in years. By the end of the month, everything was booked and finalized. Flights arranged, cabins assigned, menus customized. The invoice was insane, but it didn't matter. I'd built my life from scratch. I could afford to give back to the people who actually deserved something. 2 months later, the ship set sail. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe chaos, maybe exhaustion. But from the moment the engines rumbled to life, I knew I'd nailed it. The air was warm, the water looked like glass, and everyone I'd invited showed up grinning like they'd just won the lottery. For once, these people, the ones who fixed, built, grew, and taught, were being treated like they actually mattered. No one asked about job titles. No one cared who had a degree or a corner office. Everyone was just happy. I walked through the dining area that first night, watching everyone eat at tables dressed in crisp linen and gold cutlery. My cousin Nate raised a glass of wine and yelled, "To Evan, the man who gave blue collars their ocean view." Everyone cheered. I laughed and waved them off. All right, all right. Right. Save your speeches for the dessert course. It didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like balance. By the second day, photos and videos started hitting social media. Sunset shots, group pictures, everyone tagging me and writing best trip ever. One post read, "Can't believe we're here. Evan, you're the real deal." Another said, "Some people talk about family. Some actually show up for it." My phone blew up. Dozens of messages, shares, comments. Meanwhile, I got a text from a buddy who worked in travel logistics. He wrote, "Dude, your parents' cruise line? Total nightmare. Ships delayed, half the plumbing's shot, and people are complaining about the food." I nearly choked on my breakfast. I looked up the reviews myself just to see, and sure enough, there it was. Toilets backed up. Hallways smell like mildew. The Wi-Fi barely works. Food's cold, staff's rude, cabin's smaller than my closet. 5-star misery. I could practically picture my mom clutching her pearls, trying to smile through it. Then my phone buzzed. "Mom." I almost ignored it, but something told me this was going to be good. I answered. Her voice came out sharp. "Evan, what is this cruise everyone's talking about?" "Hi, Mom." "You sound stressed. Everything okay on your ship?" "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "Why didn't you tell us you were doing this? Everyone's posting photos. You invited all those people and didn't invite us?" I leaned against the railing, watching the lights bounce off the water. "You mean the people you didn't think were classy enough?" "Yeah, those are my guests. I just gave them the trip they deserved." Dad's voice cut in. "This is childish, Evan. You're trying to embarrass us." I laughed. "No, I think you did that on your own. You told half the family they weren't good enough. I just gave them a better vacation." Mom huffed. "You're being disrespectful." "Right," I said. "Because nothing says respect like telling your own son he's beneath your standards. Don't worry, though. I'll send you a special invitation next time." Before either of them could respond, I hung up. I slipped my phone in my pocket and walked back toward the deck. The ship's crew had just brought out dessert, chocolate soufflés, and fancy fruit plates that looked like art. My Uncle Rob waved me over, asking, "Everything good?" "Perfect," I said. The band started playing a slow tune. I sat down beside some of my cousins and watched everyone just enjoy being alive. There were no fake smiles, no backhanded compliments, no one judging who had the better job. Just people who worked hard, finally relaxing without feeling small. As I sipped my drink, I thought about Mom's voice. Tight, panicked, angry. She wasn't mad about being left out. She was mad that her illusion cracked. For the first time, she wasn't the one calling the shots or defining what classy meant. The irony made me grin. Somewhere, my parents were probably sitting in a broken-down dining room, picking at bland buffet food while watching their classy cruise fall apart. And me? I was eating pancakes on a sunlit deck, surrounded by people who actually mattered. That call from them earlier, it didn't hurt. It didn't even bother me. It just confirmed what I already knew. They'd never understand what real success looked like. As the ship's horn echoed across the open water, I leaned on the railing and thought, that call felt better than any apology ever could. A week later, I sent out a few formal invitations. Just 3, actually. One for my mom, one for my dad, and one for Diane. Each came in a gold embossed envelope with a logo at the top, Harrison Developments. Underneath, it read, "You are cordially invited to the grand opening of the Solaris Resort, developed and built by Harrison Developments." The Solaris Resort was my newest project, bigger and riskier than the first $180 million build that put my company on the map. I led the design with my in-house architects from blueprint to finish. Oceanfront, glass towers, infinity pools, restaurants, and an event stage that looked straight out of a movie. It was the kind of place that made people stop and stare, the kind of place my parents used to point at in magazines and say, "Imagine if Diane's husband could build something like that." Well, I imagined it. And then I built it. Opening day was chaos in the best way. Journalists, investors, and celebrities were flying in. My team was running around with earpieces and clipboards like a Hollywood set. I was in a dark suit, no tie, sleeves rolled, because if I was going to make a statement, it wasn't going to be with some rented tux. They showed up right before the ribbon cutting. I spotted them from across the marble courtyard. Mom in pearls, Dad in a blazer 2 sizes too tight, Diane pretending to check her phone like she hadn't been dying to be noticed. They walked up smiling, all sugar and fake warmth. "Evan," Mom said, voice high and rehearsed, "we are so proud of you. We've told everyone how hard you've worked. Dad nodded like a politician. You've really made something of yourself, son. Yeah, I bet they did. Probably after seeing my name trending online. I smiled, polite and empty. Glad you could make it. Please, enjoy the event. I shook their hands like I was greeting business partners, not family. Then I turned to the guests arriving behind them, leaving them to stand there awkwardly. Throughout the evening, they tried making small talk with anyone who'd listen. I caught bits and pieces. Mom bragging about how she always knew Evan was destined for greatness. Dad telling some investor he'd taught me the value of hard work. Diane laughed along like it wasn't all brand new to her, too. The thing about pretending? People who actually know you can see right through it. During the ribbon cutting, reporters surrounded me with cameras flashing. One of them asked, "What inspired you to build the Solaris?" I glanced at my parents, standing near the back, trying to blend in. Let's just say I wanted to create something that reminded people you don't need approval to build your own path. Applause followed. Mom clapped too, not realizing the jab was hers. After the ceremony, we had fireworks ready to launch from the pier. Guests moved to the balconies to watch the show. I stood near the stage, greeting people and answering questions, when Mom touched my arm. Evan, can we talk for a minute? I sighed and motioned her toward the private lounge area. Dad and Diane followed, like backup singers, for an apology no one asked for. Mom started first. I know we haven't always shown it, but we are so proud of you. Her voice cracked like she'd practiced crying in the mirror. We just want to be part of your life again. You've done amazing things, and we'd love to. I raised a hand. Stop. They froze. I looked at them. These people who once called me the embarrassment of the family, who mocked the only woman who ever loved me, who cut me out because I wasn't wearing a tie. You made your choice years ago, I said. You picked your image over your son. You don't get to rewrite the story now just because the ending looks good. Dad's face went red. Don't talk to us like we're strangers. I met his stare. You are strangers. Then I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard Mom whisper something to Diane, her voice cracking like glass. I didn't turn back. Outside, the first firework went off, gold sparks raining over the ocean. The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed. The reflection danced off the water, lighting up the resort's glass walls. That was my moment. Not revenge, not payback, just closure. As the crowd cheered, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something made me answer. Evan? The voice froze me for a second. Miley. Hey, I said, surprised but calm. Didn't expect to hear from you. I saw the opening all over social media, she said softly. You did it. I always knew you could. Thanks, I said. Took a while, but I got there. I'm sorry for leaving back then, she continued. I was scared. Your parents. They made me feel small. I thought I was saving us from years of that. I get it, I said. You didn't owe me anything, but I appreciate you calling. She paused. I'm proud of you, Evan. I mean that. I smiled, looking out at the fireworks bursting over the water. Thanks, Miley. That means more than you think. We said goodbye. Simple. Peaceful. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and walked out onto the balcony. The ocean shimmered. The sky lit up in red and gold, and the Solaris stood behind me like proof that every insult, every rejection, every "you'll never make it" was fuel I'd burned to get here. They called me useless, I said quietly, watching the reflection of fire in the waves. Now they'd give anything to stand beside me. I smiled. Funny how that works. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.